The lingering touch of my cousin changed everything that night. Emily stood in the guest room with her pulse pounding while the rain pattered softly on the window. Standing behind her, her cousin Liam's words was hardly audible above a whisper. With his breath warm on her neck, he said, "You don't have to say anything. But this is the moment I've been waiting for." The unsaid tension between them reached a breaking point as she turned and met his gaze. A time to reunite with relatives who often seemed more like strangers as the years went by. Family reunions were always a mix of sadness and longing. They were mostly unmemorable to Emily, a rush of courteous small talk and dodging inquisitive queries. However, things were different this year. Her aunt's massive lakefront estate, a stunning retreat far from the bustle of the city, was the venue for the reunion. One of the familiar faces, her cousin Liam, stood out more than the others. Liam had always been endearing, drawing people in with his quick wit and effortless smile. They had only ever seen each other over the holidays as children, but now that they were adults, there was something about him that seemed different. His gaze lingered on her longer than before, and he exuded confidence. Emily made an effort to block out the ideas that were racing through her head. He was her cousin, she told herself. This is all in your imagination. The family gathered around the bonfire by the lake on the second evening of the reunion. The smell of roasting marshmallows and laughter filled the air. Liam sat down next to Emily, who was sitting on a log, watching the flames dance. He offered her a beer and said, "Quiet night, huh?" She smiled and took the drink, saying, "Just soaking it all in." They struck up a casual conversation, catching up on the years they had been apart and recalling childhood antics. However, Emily became intensely aware of the way Liam's knee touched hers, and his eyes lingered on her lips as she spoke, while the fire blazed and the night became darker. He abruptly said, "You've changed, Em," in a softer voice. Unexpectedly, she turned to face him. "What do you mean?" "You're unique, more powerful." With his gaze scanning hers, he remarked, "More confident. It fits you." Her cheeks flushed as she turned back to the fire, unsure how to respond. "Thanks, Liam. You've changed too." Later that night, as the family began to drift off to bed, Emily found herself in the kitchen, rinsing out her mug. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Liam lounging casually against the doorframe. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, his voice low. "Just needed some water," she answered, her pulse increasing as he drew closer. "Same," he responded, his gaze firm. "Mind if I join you for a bit?" She shrugged, attempting to appear nonchalant. "Suit yourself." They sat at the kitchen table, the quiet of the house amplifying the tension between them. Liam leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" he asked suddenly. Emily grimaced, astonished by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." His voice was tinged with frustration as he said, "It feels like you're doing what everyone expects, following the rules, but none of it feels real." Slowly, her chest tightened as she nodded. "Indeed. Always." The air between them was charged with an unspoken connection as their eyes locked. Their conversation became more intimate and in-depth as the minutes passed. For a second longer than it should have, Liam's hand touched hers across the table. "Liam," she began, her voice shaking. "We shouldn't..." "I understand," he broke off, his eyes intense. "But Emily, you're always on my mind. I've attempted, but it's not feasible." As his words set in, her heart began to accelerate. "This is insane," she muttered. "Perhaps," he said, bending in closer. "But that's the reality." Before she could react, he held her face and planted a slow, purposeful kiss on her lips. The intensity of his kiss and the warmth of his touch melted Emily's resistance as she froze for a second, her thoughts screaming at her to stop. As weeks or maybe years of unsaid feelings poured over, their reserve broke down, and the kiss grew deeper. Liam's hand slipped to her waist, bringing her closer as Emily's fingers twisted in his hair. She said against his lips, her voice shaking, "You're impossible." With his breath warm against her skin, he answered, "And you're unforgettable." The kitchen, bathed in the beautiful glow of moonlight, became their sanctuary as they gave in to the bond they could no longer ignore. Emily woke the next morning to the sound of birds chirping outside the window. The night's events replayed in her thoughts, and her heart sunk. She looked at Liam, who was seated in a chair near the window with an unreadable expression on his face, and sat up, stroking her hair. She broke the silence by whispering, "We need to talk." He answered in a sad voice, "I know, it shouldn't have happened last night." "But it did," she replied in a quivering voice. "And now I don't know how to move forward." Footsteps rang out from the corridor before Liam could reply. The happy, gullible voice of their aunt called out, "The breakfast is prepared." As Liam stood there, his jaw tensing, Emily's stomach rumbled. With a steady stare, he continued, "We'll figure it out." Emily couldn't get rid of the sensation that someone was observing her as they sat down at the breakfast table with the family. She glanced up to see her younger cousin, Mia, staring at her with a knowing look. Mia drew her aside after breakfast, her face grave. "Emily," she said warily, "last night I saw you and Liam." Emily's breath caught as her chest constricted. Mia interrupted in a calm voice. "Calm down. I will not say anything. However, you must exercise caution. People will take notice." As Mia left, Emily nodded, her heart aching. The repercussions of whatever had started between her and Liam were already imminent, but it was far from over. Emily was by alone on the veranda, gazing out at the serene lake while the breakfast table was cleared away and the family scattered off to different pursuits. She felt the pressure of Mia's words pressing down on her chest. Take caution. The shame and need that had been building since last night blended with the warning as it played over in her head. Liam was seated next her, his presence as solid as the morning sun, and she hardly saw him coming. His fingers brushed hers as he offered her a hot cup of coffee, a move that felt far more personal than it should have. Emily whispered, "She knows," while keeping her eyes on the ocean. Liam's face grew serious. "Mia?" Emily nodded, her voice shaking. She claimed to have seen us. He ran a hand through his hair and leaned back. "Was there anything else she said?" Emily said, "She won't tell anyone, but this is too dangerous, Liam. If someone else discovers—" Liam moved in closer, speaking softly. "We'll take care of it, Em. Together." The day flew by in a blur of staged smiles and calculated exchanges. Emily made every effort to stay away from Liam, but there was always a noticeable tension between them. The family made the decision to play games in the living room that evening. Emily struggled to control her feelings as the laughing and companionship felt almost oppressive. Liam, who was seated across from her, repeatedly attracted her attention with his meaningless gaze. As the games came to a conclusion and the family started to split up, Emily needed a moment to herself, so she slipped out onto the porch. She was glad of the cool night air, but that didn't stop her mind from racing. She wasn't by herself for very long. Liam's shadow stretched across the wooden floor as he emerged in the doorway. He stated in a steady but irritated tone, "You can't keep running from this." Emily's arms were crossed defensively as she turned to face him. "I'm not going to run. I'm attempting to keep the family and ourselves safe." He moved in closer, looking into her eyes. "What about our emotions? Should we simply act as though it doesn't exist?" He grabbed for her hand, sending shivers down her spine as his contact made her breath catch. "This isn't possible, Liam," she muttered. "We're cousins. People will never comprehend." He said quietly, "Emily, we're more than that. You are as aware of it as I am." Liam's voice fell to a whisper as he stepped closer, the tension in the air between them crackling. "I'll leave if you tell me to. But if you feel even a quarter of what I do, don't push me away." Emily's heart raced, her thoughts a tornado of dread, desire, and bewilderment. She knew what she should do, what was proper. But as Liam cupped her face, his touch warm and grounding, her resolve crumbled. "I hate you for making this so hard," she murmured, her voice trembling. He leaned in and said, "And I can't hate you for anything." With all the feelings they had attempted to suppress, their lips locked in a tender and desperate kiss. As they gave in to the connection they couldn't resist, the outside world dimmed, and the porch and the night sky were their only realities. Just as the kiss deepened, the sound of a door creaking open shattered the moment. Emily pulled away, her heart pounding as she turned to see Mia standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Mia," Emily began, her voice cracking. Mia silenced her by raising a hand. "I already told you I wouldn't say anything," she responded, her tone calm but forceful. "But you need to figure out what you're doing, before someone else sees." Emily's stomach churned as Mia disappeared back into the house, leaving her and Liam alone on the porch. "This can't keep happening," Emily muttered. her voice full with agony. With a steady gaze, Liam answered, "It's already happening. We simply need to choose how to handle it." Emily awoke the following morning to the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. She sat up, her chest straining as the events of the night replayed in her thoughts. When she eventually made her way downstairs, Liam was there, his countenance placid, but his eyes conveying a weight that only she could fathom. Unnoticed by the rest of the family, the tension between them persisted throughout the day as a subtle undercurrent. But for Emily, the worry lingered. How long could they keep their secret before everything came tumbling down? As the evening wore on, the family began to retreat to their rooms, the laughter and chatter fading into the quiet hum of the lakeside house. Emily lingered on the porch, her thoughts heavy, the cool night air caressing over her skin. She wasn't sure how much more of this she could handle. The stolen looks, the whispered words, the weight of what had already transpired. Her reverie was interrupted by the sound of the sliding door opening. As she looked around, she saw Liam enter the porch with a solemn yet determined attitude. He said, "We can't leave things like this and shut the door." "Liam," she began, her voice shaking. "This is getting out of hand. Mia already saw us once." If anyone else, he stepped closer and interrupted, saying, "Stop. What other people think is irrelevant to me. We are important to me. Regarding you." His words lingered in the air, making her breath catch. Her voice was hardly heard as she said, "You're making this impossible." "And you're making it impossible for me to walk away," he countered, his gaze locking with hers. The distance between them evaporated as Liam closed the gap, his hand reaching out to brush her arm. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver through her, and before she could stop herself, she leaned into him. "Liam, this is crazy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Then let it be crazy," he replied, his voice low. "But don't pretend it's not real." His lips met hers in a kiss that was hesitant at first, but quickly deepened as the tension between them exploded. Emily's hands found their way to his chest, her fingers grasping at his shirt as he pulled her closer. "You're impossible," she muttered against his lips, her voice unsteady. "And you're unforgettable," he answered in a passionate tone. The porch, bathed in moonlight, became their shelter as they gave in to the connection they had been denying for so long. Liam's hands slipped to her waist, pressing her gently against the railing as their kiss got more passionate, their breaths mingling in the cool night air. Just as their passion reached its peak, the sound of footsteps on the wooden floorboards inside froze them both. Emily pushed him away, her heart beating as she turned for the door. Mia stood there, her silhouette framed by the light from the kitchen. Her arms were folded, her countenance unreadable. "I warned you," she replied quietly, her tone calm but forceful. Emily said in a shaky voice, "Mia, please." Mia shook her head and sighed. "I won't share with anyone." "But you two must pull yourself together. It's no longer just about you." Mia turned and walked away, leaving them alone once more, and Emily felt her chest tighten. Despite the tempest that was building around them, Liam maintained a solid grip as he reached for her hand. "We'll work it out," he murmured quietly. Emily's feelings were a flurry of longing, guilt, and fear as she gazed at him. "What if we are unable to?" "We will," he answered firmly, "because I'm not going to let this go. Never, ever now." The burden of their secret weighed heavily on them both as the night wore on. However, Emily was unable to ignore the reality as Liam drew her into his arms once more. No matter how unlikely it appeared, they had already crossed the line, and there was no turning back.